Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
We've had 2 rounds of European action and there are 2 URC teams left in contention. We'll be reviewing all of the action and setting ourselves up for the next round of the United Rugby Championship tonight on the URC Rewind. Let's start the show.
You're listening to United Rugby Rewind.
I am joined by B and C, Ben, Policeman Ben, and that Kaelin. Good evening, gents.
Good evening.
And I'm joined by a new face. So those of you who may remember a couple of weeks ago, South African Alan has had to step away from the podcast. He's got other things going on in his life. All the best, Alan. But we are joined by a different South African. We are joined by Mohammed. Good evening, Mohammed.
Good evening, guys. Glad to be here.
So, Mohammed, just tell us a bit about yourself, what team you support, where in South Africa you're from, what your rugby biases are.
So I'm a Cape Town resident, sunny Cape Town, and I support the Natal Sharks. And yeah, glad to be here. Obviously, somewhat biased towards the Sharks, but try to keep things balanced.
There's no. All you need to do is just declare what your biases are and then shoot from the hip. That's what all the rest of us do. And that's what you'll get used to doing as well. So we'll make a start then. So from a URC point of view, there's only one thing to talk about when it comes to European rugby, and that is Leinster, the only team left in the Champions Cup from our league and the dominant sides. They talk about dominance, 52-0 against Glasgow in the not as bad as Harlequins game of the week, but only just. I don't know. Where do I want to go first? Ben, what's the excuses from a Glasgow point of view?
They're gonna say they didn't have their midfield maestros in Jones and Tupelo, and Xander Ferguson was missing, and I just think they went there. There was no belief in that side that went out there. And I think what epitomised it for me is after 15 minutes, I think it was still scoreless, and Kyle Rowe, maybe at 7-0 or 0-0, had a little chip and charge over, and Geordie Barrett's been back, and Kyle Rowe just stopped running, and I didn't understand it. He didn't even try and chase it down. Geordie Barrett comes out of it and then just kicks the ball into touch, and then regain the territory. And after that, I don't think Glasgow really attacked after that. That was it. And Geordie Barrett, he was unbelievable. What a player. And him and Prendergast's kicking game was back to its best. I think those two were just unbelievable the entire game, just pulling strings, game management. James Lowe was outstanding on the wing again. Hugo Keenan under the high ball was fantastic. Front row was fantastic. But I mean, Franco Smith came out and said it's hard to disagree with them. Leinster are probably better than Ireland at the moment because of people like Geordie Barrett in that side, just driving that team forward. 3 or 4 jackals. He was playing like a back rower at 12.
He won 4 turnovers in the first half. 4. I was speechless.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I think this might be the season they regain, they get that extra star on their shirt for next season. I think this is their season.
Well, we're not talking about Toulon Toulouse on this pod, but I think those are the 2 teams most likely to challenge them. Obviously, Toulon going out in brutal fashion, but without Dupont, I don't think Toulouse have got what it takes for me.
Yeah, I think spot on.
So, what even is there to say? Because it's such an uncompetitive game. I don't think that. Don't get me wrong. I don't think Glasgow were great by any means, but I think there were tries in there that I don't think Glasgow could have done anything about. I don't think.
I'd say all of them, to be honest. Yeah, I think they were just Adam Hastings, obviously. I think 1 or 2 tries came after he kind of went for a little, sort of trying to keep the ball intercept, but he did drag it down. And I think after that, Leinster just kind of went went through the gears. But you're right. I think every single Leinster try was unstoppable. Really, I think most defences in Europe, if not the world, if not some international teams, wouldn't be able to cope with that. I think they were that good on Friday night.
No, I agree. I think from what you said about Leinster better than Ireland, I'd go with that because
of Geordie Barrett, I think predominantly.
I can't remember seeing Ireland play like that. I can't remember seeing anyone play like that. And I put that on. I posted that saying, I've never seen Toulouse play like that. Certainly not this season. So
And that's two games in a row without conceding a single point. That's just
it's ridiculous.
Harlequins are not a bad team either, and they've just breezed through them as though they weren't there.
So, Mohammed, I'll come to you next. So, what was your take on this one? Watching this,
It was a quality game, I guess. Some might argue not that entertaining, but if you're just looking at it from a neutral point of view, or obviously for the Leinster supporters, they must have really enjoyed it. I think Barrett and Erge Snyman obviously make a big difference. Slimani as well. We got to give credit there. And I've seen some comments on sort of social media and sort of rugby Reddit saying, well, it's quite interesting that Leinster are attacking quite well, in addition to sort of the really, really good defense that they're showing that they initially sort of implemented last year. And it could be a case of them not showing their cards too soon and maybe having trained this sort of attack for a couple of weeks, and now only in the latter parts of certain tournaments are they really sort of cutting loose. Either that or they're just overwhelming the opposition, because Glasgow didn't have a bad team per se, especially the starting team. Maybe their bench was really the issue, that their bench are quality players, but maybe still coming along, but then couldn't handle what Leinster had off the bench as well.
yeah. So I'll come to you now, Kaelan. Just the chat online. Let's just be brutally honest about it. Some people aren't happy about what we saw on Friday night. Some people are saying almost that it's unfair that this is able to happen. And we don't, in the knockout rounds of European Cups, we don't want to see 60-0s, 50-0s ever. But is unfair the right word for it?
I mean, I can see why you'd say it. Like, important to stress, Glasgow are not a poor club. Like that, like if you're going to go on about budgets, Glasgow are not poor. Like they have a bit of backing, but ultimately, like who are the three tournament favourites to win it from here? Bordeaux, Toulouse, and Leinster. Two richest club in France and the richest club in the URC by quite some distance.
I would just jump in Bordeaux and not the second richest club in France.
Splitting hairs, but yes, okay, fair enough. But one of the richest clubs in France, and
Hashtag fact check.
fact checking is very important in this day and age, people. But it's a factor. Do you know what I mean? Like, I understand when people say it. Like, it's a bad look for the competition, a competition that is on its knees. Like, if we're being honest, like it is. Like, for every great result, like the game today was brilliant. Munster La Rochelle last week, CAF Benetton was a great game. There was some great games at the pool stages, like again, Benetton turning over La Rochelle. But I understand why fans are growing despondent with the competition, because ultimately, how do you keep up? Do you know, that's the position we're in. There's an awful lot of stupid pointing of the finger. Like when you look at something like, oh, it's the round of 16. The round of 16 could have worked years ago when everyone cared, but now they don't. So it's not working. Do you know what I mean? So like, I understand it. It's not Leinster's fault. It's not Toulouse's fault. I mean, if you're going to blame anyone in terms of the Irish rugby bubble, it's not Leinster. It's the top of the tree. It's the union that have caused this disparity, more than they used to. So, yeah, it's frustrating for sure.
There's
Yeah.
there's two things they need to do with both competitions. First of all, get rid of the round of 16, and second of all, get rid of this silly relegation into the Challenge Cup from the Champions Cup. I don't rate it. I think you've got to keep the competition separate and get rid of the round of 16. And then go back to sort of more competitive games. The Challenge Cup, I just looked through the results. Even from the round of 16 onwards, every single game in that has been fairly competitive until Bath beat Gloucester today. There's all within 10, 15 points. The three of the four games today were all decided by less than a score. So that has been, I think, from a neutral perspective, and of course, me being an Edinburgh fan, I'm going to place more focus on it. But the Challenge Cup has been better this season than the Champions Cup, I think, in terms of output, quality, jeopardy. Quite a few more away wins as well, because obviously you've got teams there that, Bulls won away the week before and obviously lost to us yesterday. So you don't have the 4 seeds in the top 4. Like there's a couple of the outside the top 4, even outside the top 8 that are left now. So yeah, I think there's that sort of extra jeopardy that's been in the Challenge Cup. But I think get rid of the round 16 and withdraw the relegation from the Champions Cup into the Challenge Cup.
And then you're adding in, like, playing a quarter final the week after round of 16 game. Like, does that work? Do you know what I mean? Like, if Anthem, the quarterfinals have almost felt more one-sided this year than ever before after the round of 16, almost felt better this year than years before as well. So it is, yeah, there's a lot of issues with the competition. Ultimately, again, it's not any one party's fault. I mean, you could blame the EPCR, to be honest, because when they came in and ripped up the script, the script they chose was not exactly a very enticing one. But there's fundamental issues, and like Leinster were the better team. There's no excuse for Glasgow packing it in like they did. There's definitely no excuse for how Quins packed it in the week before, where Leinster were also the better team and not very good. Yeah, I can see why people grow frustrated, because ultimately this was a competition the fans used to enjoy, not exactly, 2 or 3 lifetimes ago, but 10 years ago. Now, who does enjoy it? Do you know what I mean? The old fashioned people who don't watch league games are certainly there, but like your Toulouse, your Leinster, your La Rochelle, I'm sure Bordeaux at the moment, Northampton at the moment, Munster will always have that connection. Saracens the same, Toulon. After that, like, to Glasgow, what we see in the weekend wouldn't suggest they do, and they're Euro C champions. Um, does Quins? No. Do you know, I could go on? Like, that is part of the issue. I don't think there is that buy-in anymore, and you have to ask if European rugby is something that we want to continue with at this stage.
It's an interesting dynamic because we're quite new to this. Initially, South African teams were in the URC, but we weren't in the EPCR competitions that initial season. I think for us, it's like fresh and interesting. Like, I don't keep track of the Challenge Cup that much. Only when the Sharks went on to win it did I really watch it that closely. I only watched the Bulls game this weekend because that's a South African team in there, and I want South African teams to do well. I was rooting for the Lions in the Challenge Cup as well. So I think you guys have a slightly different perspective of it, a more historical backdrop to that. So it's unique in that respect. Not to say that our perspective is incorrect or yours. It's just coming from different sides. I think it's also was quite fresh for us, having played in Super Rugby for so many years, and then sort of finding it somewhat tedious. But then every year when Super Rugby would start, you'd get like really excited again, and you'd actually just get stuck in, despite its flaws.
The structure of the Super Rugby season is very different to that you are seeing. Super Rugby is February to June, July, and it's done, isn't it? And then you go straight into the Rugby Championship with the 4 nations. And I think the South African teams from the start done very well to kind of adapt to the travelling. I know it's less travelling and it's less jet lag because you obviously go north to south as opposed to east to west. But I do think having the South African teams in European competition is a good thing. I know there's people on the Anglo side maybe not so keen on that, but I think everyone else thinks that if you're in a domestic competition that involves you with other European teams, then you should also, have access to the European competition. I think it said it all when the Sharks, won the Challenge Cup last year, that there is buy-in there, at certain points when, maybe the league form's not going so well and they're going to focus on Europe. So, yeah, I think it's a good thing that all the teams get involved to the extent that they do.
Because how it used to be for South African teams was that we'd have one tournament at a time, except for during Super Rugby, you would have what was at that time known as the Vodacom Cup, and then it evolved into the DStv Championship. It's sort of like a reserve league while Super Rugby was on, so that your broader Super Rugby team would still get game time, and then the Currie Cup would happen. So it's a unique sort of almost football type format now in European rugby, where we play the URC, and then we also play a couple of Challenge Cup or Champions Cup games, and then go back to URC, that type of thing. And then at the end because we effectively have a 365 and a quarter day season, where the players who played a lot of URC, they get rest time and then preseason for URC, whereas the guys who didn't play that much or on the fringes of the team or are like stars in the under 20 team, they actually play Currie Cup, which is fantastic for me who likes to watch rugby all the time, because the Currie Cup is very interesting for Stormers and Sharks and Bulls and Lions fans, because that's when we get to see the next generation of our talent come through. So that's also an adjustment, because back in the day we would just have one tournament to focus on at a time.
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, the thing that I've disagreed with when I've seen people talking about it on social media off the back of this Leinster result is the kind of people saying it's unfair, and specifically people saying that the format is unfair. But I don't like the format, but I think whatever format it was, you get the same results. The good
You
teams would win,
didn't.
and the less
That's the
team
thing. It
good
used to
teams
be
would
an
win.
open draw for a semi-final until EPCR came along.
Oh,
Do you know what I mean? Like the idea of having 4 games to decide your next four
Yeah, but
games
the
is
better team would always win.
not necessarily.
Well, in this
I
case, if
mean,
we're talking about
Ulster
to
scraped in 2011, went to Munster, went to Thomond Park, became the first team to win there in nearly 10
yeah,
years.
but
Munster did the same thing to Quins 2 years later.
we're talking about the levels though. We're talking about here now in
I understand that.
2025 with Leinster and Toulouse. Like Toulouse have just gone away to Toulon, which is pretty much the hardest away day other than Leinster in European rugby at the moment, and managed to sneak it through. So we're still talking about Toulouse and Leinster being the teams that would get through, and I don't think it makes it unfair. Okay, maybe it's an open draw, but it's but that's introducing an element of a lottery to it. So what's fair about a lottery? At the moment, you earn your home games through winning
It's four
games.
games. It's 4 games for four
Well, it's
games.
the
That's
same
the
for
thing.
everybody.
I understand that, but that's still like that's heavily stilted. Do you know what I mean? Like
Well, is
if it was a case of you got your round of 16 in your quarterfinal and semi-final was even neutral venue, it does not feel as strong. I know it's sorry, it's not 4-4, it's 4-3. I still go back to, the old talk about this is a home venue. This is a home venue for the final when it's not like Marseille and Dublin. But no, I do think it is heavily stilted. I do understand that. Like ultimately, like even the fact that Toulouse went unbeaten in the pool stages and were fifth seed is kind of rubbish. Do you know what I mean? Because again, it's only 4 games and they didn't play everyone in their pool. Do you know? Like is that right either? Like I'm not far from me to stand up for Toulouse of all teams. Like, do you know what I mean? They could do that for themselves. But again, is that a proper format? Like 6 games feels like a much better rule of thumb than 4, even 5 games. Whereas now it's kind of 4 for 3, and then because it's around the 16 and teams don't really care, you'll have 1 or 2 teams who qualify that don't really care. Or, for example, they might have to go to South Africa and they have a big league game before and then focus on the league, which is absolutely their imperative to do so, which is why the round of 16 debate is interesting. But again, the format faults are real, and I do think it is an imbalanced system. I'm not saying this deck is stacked. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it is imbalanced. Because again, like Toulouse had the exact same record as Bordeaux, bar 1 bonus point when they went down to South Africa, and yet they're away from home. Is that, Whereas Northampton went 3 from 1. They got hammered instead.
well, what you're saying is it's unlucky that Toulouse got a draw, which meant they had to go down to South Africa. But then you're saying you want a random draw for the
For
knockout round, for
semi-finals, I would.
which for all we know could be
Oh yeah.
another trip to South Africa, which would
Yeah.
then be unfair again,
Well, for
surely.
semi-finals, they won't allow that. But yeah, for semi-finals, I think it would be fair to go back to a different system, to be honest.
I can't agree that it's unfair when it rewards the best teams. Like I can not like it. I'm not saying that I like the format because I really don't. But I can't sit here and call it unfair that the best teams win.
I mean, I do see what you mean. Like maybe unfair is the wrong word, but I just think that it's a case of you've got 4 games in a 24-team competition to decide the entire seeding. It doesn't feel like a fair representation. That's my bigger thing. And I know there's always going to be stronger and tougher pools. That is natural. But 4 games is not a lot. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not like it's too break. It's 2 windows essentially. Do you know what I mean? Like that doesn't feel like a lot for me. And we could go on and on and on. I'm sure the lads have different opinions as well. But I don't know. I just think it's one of those things that if you fixed it, I don't think anyone would complain. Okay, yeah, someone will complain. Sorry. It's 2025. Someone's about to complain. But leaving it as it is and still getting these results makes you look and just think we have to change something. Like something. At least like not holding my hand up here, but at least I'm bringing some solution to the table. Might be a solution. It could be the worst idea going, but at least someone's offering something. Do you know what I mean?
I just, and I've said it before, I just think that the time is ticking for the European competition as a concept.
I agree.
Because like you said, Mohammed, it's like the Champions League in football, and I think in Europe, rugby has lived in the shadow of football in terms of trying to copy things from it, and it just doesn't work. It's not the same thing, and I think that's where you can get football teams to play 2 or even 3 games a week. That's impossible in rugby. So I think we just need to call it and say, look, this doesn't work anymore in 2025. That's just my opinion. But having said that, we do need to go on and talk about a bunch of other games that have happened in this format. So we'll do that now. So we're going to take a trip down to the Challenge Cup, and we're going to talk about Edinburgh versus Bulls. So, Ben, I'll let you go first, being the Edinburgh fan wearing the Edinburgh jersey. Ever in?
Maybe for the end of the season now. Yeah. It's just a really good game. It's just one of those games I was just really surprised by how well we played, considering, 2 South African teams in a row, and obviously those are the 2 South African teams we got comfortably beaten by earlier in the season away. James Lang had probably the best game he's had in Edinburgh jersey yesterday. It was fantastic. I think the first try was, very well worked. Second try, a bit of luck, but you make your own luck. Obviously, a little kick came off South Africa, off the ball's back, and then, just bobbled up, caught and run it through. Magnus Bradbury was very good again yesterday. Grant Gilchrist, try shortly after half time. And then we were kind of cruising. And I think the difference between where we were a few weeks ago to today is just how ferocious we were in our defence in that last 20 minutes. I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think we would have lost that game because it was only 6 points, and the 6 points were Ross Thompson's 2 penalties. Which were very astutely taken at the times of the game that he did take them. I think one took us up to 17-7 and the next one took us to 34, I think, at that point in time. So they were the right time to kick the penalties as opposed to kicking for touch. The Bulls, I think they're a little bit unlucky, but there was some ill discipline in there that probably let them down. A couple of the other cards, one could have been a red. I think it was quite a high headshot on Pierre Schumann. But I think the last 20 minutes just defined the sort of difference between us of 3 weeks ago, sort of the away games against Benetton, home to Zebre, and then that performance yesterday. Jamie Ritchie, again, just an absolute beast at the breakdown, Jacqueline, Pierre Schumann the same, Bradbury, and Ben Muncaster came on and kind of shored things up. I think Ben Velicott had another good game in that jersey, and now we know that Ali Price is going, which I'm not too bothered about. I think his time is done in Edinburgh. I don't think he's been that good this season. His box kicking was good again yesterday. And it was just a fantastic result. I think I have gone and bought a ticket for the final based on yesterday because I think we could give Bath a bit of a fright at home. I think we could beat anybody at home, whether Bath, where at that point in the season, whether they, top 4 and they're looking for a Premiership's home semi-final and then onto final where they bring the big guns up, whether Finn Russell comes up, Barbary, etc., etc. Who knows? But I think I'd back us at home against anybody at this rate. And yeah, yesterday was just a brilliant performance. But I think the Bulls did have a good go. I think it was just a little bit of dissonance and maybe some not the sort of most efficient decision making in sort of the 22 that we've probably been accustomed to over the last couple of years. They've been URC finalists, very close against Glasgow last year. Obviously, I think they lost the first season as well, didn't they, to the Stormers in Cape Town off the top of my head. So yeah, I think it was a big win yesterday. It was a statement win. I think it's probably our biggest win of the season, apart from the Munster game in Cork. So yeah, just really, really happy and good to see a strong Edinburgh performance for the whole 80 minutes, which I think has been not always been there this season.
Yeah, the Bulls have got a good record on tour as well. They've only lost 1 game in the Northern Hemisphere so far this season. So Mohammed, from a Bulls point of view, what went wrong? What was your take on the game? Because they kind of let Edinburgh get off to a fast start. Give us your take on this one.
Yeah, as a Shark supporter who was supporting the Bulls in the Challenge Cup this weekend, I was disappointed in their performance in general, especially the start. They sent a strong team, much different to last year when in the Champions Cup they sent a second-string team to get killed by Northampton. So they were actually going for it, and they played quite well last week in France against Bayonne. They've shuffled the deck somewhat with the players, and they were definitely trying to sort of like keep the game close and then maybe overwhelm the Scottish team in the second half, but it didn't quite work out because the guys who started made some silly mistakes. I completely agree with Ben that Janus Kirsten should really have been sent off. In fact, maybe the first tackle was supposed to be a red, but he got somewhat lucky. James Lang was incredibly lucky that he kicked the ball against Wilco Lowe's substantially large right knee, and then it bounced back and he grabbed it, and then he scored a try under the post. But overall, Edinburgh was the rightful winners, and the Bulls, they tried their best. They made it close at points, and then the Scottish team pulled away. It is what it is. I think the Bulls, at some point, with a lot of teams that played eight knockout games this weekend, a lot of teams might have at some point gone, okay, we tried, we're going to regroup. We're in for a shot on the URC knockouts as well. We'll just sort of make the most of it. So yeah.
Yeah, I think there was talk about the Bulls maybe being strong enough to win it, and that's something that I wrote about as well in an article in the week. It's just this weird Edinburgh home form thing that doesn't seem to make any sense. You watch them and you think these aren't very good.
We've lost the top of the league at home and bottom of the league at home. Zebre and well, not the bottom, but close second bottom after the Dragons. We lost to Leinster and Zebre at home, and that's it all season. Yeah,
it's just a very iffy team there at Edinburgh, and I think Bulls should be a bit disappointed, to be honest. I would have liked to think that. My point when I spoke to a Bulls fan in the week was, if the Bulls want to be a champion team and the Bulls are aiming to win the URC, then my point is Edinburgh is the level of opposition you need to be able to beat even away from home, even with the long journey and everything. That's my point of view. So I think the Bulls should be disappointed. But just one thing, Mohammed, and maybe get your view on this, is the Bulls scrum. I did a bit of deep diving into scrum stats in the week, and the Bulls scrum is just a superpower. I think it's by a long way the best in club rugby.
Yep, it's very good. It's definitely a focus for them. They just have struggled to make the most of those opportunities. I think we can all remember when the Bulls were probably unlucky to lose the Sharks twice this season, and especially in the game in Durban, where they had substantial amount of penalties from scrums, but they just couldn't convert that into points. And you have to be executing a lot better than that. If I look at the teams that started, though, the Bulls going into the season, I was saying, are they really going to go with only an aging Johan Goosen, who they brought on for the last sort of 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and did quite well. But their fly-off stock for me was a bit of a concern. So yeah, the Bulls, not just the front row, but like the whole pack, they try and focus on that, and they're the most sort of effective, if not maybe even sometimes they beat the opposition psychologically. I mean, when they recruited Wilco Lowe, who had sort of made his name and come through the ranks at the Stormers and Western Province, and then gone on to play really well at Harlequins. When they recruited him back to South Africa, every team was somewhat envious of that. But they really got sort of a strong recruitment focus there, and in terms of their financial backing for their, we're talking about wealthy clubs. The Bulls aren't by any means poor. They're being backed by two extremely wealthy South Africans in Patrice Motsepe and Johan Rupert. So they've got a very I think their recruitment is a bit more balanced than the Sharks, whereas we have very high profile players where they've got a lot of really, really good players, where the drop off from our really good players to our squad players is much bigger than the Bulls, whereas they have a broader team. That having been said, I looked at the Edinburgh team, and I will say your captain played extremely well. And we also need to talk about the struggles with the line out in that game, because neither team or four hooker or line out jumpers could really find any kind of
it's been a bit of a weekend for lineouts, because to lose Toulon, which again we're not talking about, the lineouts, I think they were more likely to win opposition ball than your own in that game. Obviously, we'll talk about Munster's god awful, abysmal lineout later on. But Ben, what's your take on the lineouts in this game?
Ewan Ashman can't throw, but he seems to be able to, post contact meters was incredible yesterday. So he's got to just sort out his basic administration, what he's there to do as a hooker, instead of focusing too much on the crash ball. I think there was a number of turnovers at the lineout yesterday. I think to kind of equal it out, Bulls, they'd win the scrum penalty, which they won a number of yesterday, but they just didn't convert it into an attacking opportunity. There would a couple missed by a mile. I think there was one where Ben Vellacott, it bounced over his head and it bounced back into play off the in-touch area. And then also there's a bit of a scrabble. We managed to win the penalty, and it was all a bit messy. But yeah, just kicking to touch on the Bulls off winning a scrum penalty was pretty poor, but our line out it's, I think, and because our hookers are the Scottish hookers, the Edinburgh hookers, and it's been, the way for a couple of years now. Tooney, for whatever reason, won't pick Johnny Matthews and won't look beyond the Edinburgh hookers, whether it's Paddy Harrison, Ewan Ashman, or Dave Cherry. There's just an issue with the line out, and it baffles me why we've allowed it to be so bad for so long, both at club and international level.
An additional sorry, my apologies, Ben. An additional factor to that is that you guys are recruiting Dylan Richardson from the Sharks, who plays sort of a Dion Fourie type hooker / open sider, and he's also had his struggles with lineouts. So there's often been somewhat harsh criticism of former Cheetahs and now Stormers, soon to be Exeter Chiefs, number 2 Joseph De Weber, with his sort of lineout struggles and stuff, despite the fact that he's like possibly the best scrummager in South Africa. But even sort of heralded number 2s are struggling, but it might have just been the condition.
Well, there was nothing wrong in Edinburgh yesterday. There was no wind. That stadium, when it gets windy, It was as fine as it could be for an Edinburgh, early summer's day, early spring day. But yeah, you're right. I think Dylan Richardson's been signed with quite some fanfare. So he will probably take that number 2 shirt for Scotland going forward over the summer. Cause I know maybe into the Six Nations, because it's definitely a weak point for us. And the other one's a scrum half. I think Ben White. I think I'd snap him up from Toulon in the season. He should come back. I think he needs to come back into a Scottish club system. We need it. 2 and 9 are our problem positions. I think Ben Vellacott's good, but he's not good enough. I don't think he's quick enough. Ben White had a very good Six Nations and probably will go to tour with the Lions. I think that was kind of the third scrum half, if not second scrum half, with him and Thomas Williams behind James and Gibson Park. But yeah, there's a couple of positions there that we need to shore up, and because they're pivotal. Your hooker and your 9, I think they're 2 incredibly important positions to have someone with some stability there. Because Ewan Ashman off the throw yesterday was very poor. I think he probably lost as many as he won yesterday, if not more. So yeah, it's a weak point both internationally and at club level.
Yeah, fair point. Okay, I'm going to talk very briefly about Ospreys versus Lyon, being another URC club and being the Welsh voice on the show. So the Ospreys absolutely battered the Scarlets. So they had a double header between the Ospreys and the Scarlets. The Scarlets won the first one, and then that was at Parky Scarlets. And then going into the Liberty, the Ospreys rotated quite heavily, and they brought in a lot of their first liners for that, whereas the Scarlets named the same 23. Swapped a couple from the bench to start it, but it was the same 23, which I think shows the discrepancy in squads there. I think the Ospreys have a much stronger, wider squad than the Scarlets. The Scarlets just don't have the people available to make the level of changes that the Ospreys did, whereas the Ospreys do have that luxury, and fair play, they made it count. Players like Jack Walsh coming back in made a huge difference, Justin Tipuric as well. And then going into the Lyon game, a disappointing defeat for me and an opportunity missed. Look, there a lot of people quoting salary caps and things after this game, but Lyon the Lyon coach did a press conference in the week where he had to defend rotating the majority of his pack. They didn't start Baptiste Coyley, who's their star scrum half. They were without Semi Randrandra and David Iniashvili, who are their star backs, both absent through injury. And the Ospreys have never won a quarter-final in European Rugby, Champions Cup, Challenge Cup, in their whole history. It's just a bizarre stat. And
a bit like Ireland.
Yeah. And then, so I was looking at the 2 team sheets on paper, knowing Welsh rugby and knowing a bit about French rugby, and I thought, I do think the Ospreys team is stronger. So for them to be down at half time, and yeah, you can talk about Lyon brought on their star players in the second half, the ones that were fit, like Guillard in the second row is an absolute beast. What a player he is. He got player of the match from 40-minute performance. It was unbelievable. But you can't say like, oh, they unloaded the bench at half time when you were losing in the first half. So yeah, just they kind of reverted back. They just seemed tense. They seemed not at it. They seemed like they've had this bounce since they brought Mark Jones back in, and they've been playing some incredible rugby, some free-flowing rugby, and they just weren't able to do that. Like if you check the stats of the game, Lyon made like 2 or 3 times the number of tackles and just manhandled the Ospreys, which is not what you expect from an Ospreys side. And look, I know they were within 2, but for me, this is just a massive missed opportunity for the Ospreys, because I think they would have been at home in the semi-final as well, if I'm not mistaken. So
home to Racing, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just a bit of a killer. It's a bit it's one that got away, and I think they should be disappointed, to be honest. And the worry for them now, and I don't think it will happen, but the concern for them now is, have they overreached themselves in terms of this season? They got four URC games left, two up north and then two down south. I think the other Welsh regions will be glad for the week off, to be honest, when it comes to Judgment Day, which is coming up next weekend. So that's probably something that will be on the Ospreys' minds now is, do they make changes going into Judgment Day? If they do, they might be vulnerable to Cardiff. If they don't, might they be a bit gassed? We're not sure. We're not sure. So that's just the quick summary of the Ospreys' point of view. If you are enjoying the show so far, please consider subscribing to the channel and dropping a like. Or if you're listening on audio formats, please consider sharing a link with a mate. It's really difficult to grow audio platforms, so any help there is much appreciated. All right then, Caitlin. So let's talk about another Champions Cup game. Back up to the Champions Cup. Let's talk about UBB versus Munster. Look, it was always going to be a tough ask for Munster to back up the big performance in La Rochelle with what would have been a giant slaying on another level to beat Bordeaux.
Yeah, no, that's it. Bordeaux were always going to be a tricky team to beat. I think having been in the stadium for the Ulster game and having watched them obviously thoroughly this week, I think Bordeaux are very beatable. They are just so patchy. Do you know what I mean? Like Ulster should not be laying a finger on them, and that performance the Munster put up should not be laying a finger on them, and yet it did. Like in the end, the scoreline floured them both weeks. Um, sorry, lads. This is audio. I understand. Big put from Rory. I'm very nervous. That's why I'm very quiet this week. But anyways, I'll go back to Munster, my favorite pastime.
You're not that quiet.
I'm quiet. Well, to be fair, I also didn't see the last two games you discussed. Whew. Anyways, back we go. So yeah, no, this was not good enough for Munster. Bordeaux, we can park that and move on. Have to discuss them. Do you know what I mean? They won the game. They were deserved winners. What annoyed me about Munster, and yeah, we can talk about set piece and we talk about all that. Munster's line was bad. It's been bad for a year and a half. Like, there's nothing, like if you don't watch Munster every week, and plenty of people listening to this don't, and that's absolutely fine. You could just look at the line and say, well, not good enough. But like that is on everyone in the building. Like it's been a year and a half now. Andy Kiriakou was line-out coach. He's gone. Graham Roundtree was head coach and has a strong set piece focus. He's gone out of the building. Alex Codling was brought in. He wasn't there this week. Absolutely fine by me. But there should not be a drop off there as soon as he leaves the building, which we have seen already before. We've seen this the week of the Edinburgh game, I think it was, when Munster's line-out fell back a bit when he was not around, or at some stage, I can't remember when exactly it was. And it's just that kind of the word that I keep coming back to with Munster is a naivety. There's a very young coaching ticket. These are things that a lot of teams go through when you have a young coaching staff in terms of experience. And I do get the sense that at times Munster can be a naive team, be it sometimes in defence, sometimes with the line out, sometimes with set piece, or line out is set piece, sometimes in attack, whatever it might be. For anyone on YouTube, just because I do like to highlight what you're showing, fans were incredible. I thought it is testament to Munster. If we're going to stand up here and slate Glasgow and talk about and talk about how they didn't turn up and they didn't want to be there and Quins didn't want to be there, Munster did. It's one thing to lose, it's another thing to lose and actually show up. Do you know what I mean? And like, look, is it good enough? No. Once like you have to back it up. You have to, do you know what I mean? But they showed up, and to their credit, I think Josh Wycherley was fantastic. Ollie Yeager was fantastic. Sean Klein and Ty Byrne are just such a good pairing alongside each other. I've said this for quite some time that Ty Byrne's best second row pairing is Sean Klein. It really is. He just plays so well alongside him. For Munster now, it's about the URC. They should have top eight secured. They've got 3 home games. I joked about it on my own pod this week that it's kind of ironic that Munster's typically your easiest game, your trip to Wales, is against a team who we thought might be being wound up, and now we're going to be fired up for that game when they play Munster because it's their last home game of the season. It's the most Munster coded thing that could ever happen, but that's why we love sport. That's why we love these things. Disappointed. I'm absolutely disappointed, but I will say, like, and I haven't spoken to a couple of the players over the last 2 weeks. Can't really fault them. Like they died with their boots on yeah, it wasn't good enough, but like that's fucking sport too. Do you know what I mean? There's things they need to look at as a coaching unit, as a leadership unit, all that kind of stuff. But like, just use this as an example because I met him and was speaking to him on the streets of La Rochelle after the game, Alex Nankfeld. Could you turn around and say that he didn't play well yesterday? No, he was fucking class. Do you know what I mean? Like he was really, really good. Tom Farrell was really good. As I said, like Josh Wycherley has gone up. Like Josh Wycherley's not a big loose head prop. It's been the one thing held against him. He's gone up against Weenie Antonio and Ben Tamifuna and has done really fucking well. Like really, really well. There was one scrum penalty yesterday that angered me because, and Ben, I know you're an, I know usually when we talk about referees, it's your level-headedness that guides the conversation. But fundamentally, going backwards in a scrum is not a penalty. And Bordeaux had one of those penalties on Josh, where it's just he got back, he went backwards. He didn't do anything else wrong. He just went backwards, and it was one of those. But if that's the only thing you're faulting against Bing, Tamifuna, and Weenie Antonio in the last 2 weeks, you're doing something right. Craig and Jack were good. Nank was good. Andrew Smith, because I know we've talked about like Zach Ward being Olympians. Andrew Smith was an Olympian last year as well. Has now scored 3 tries in 2 Heineken Cup games for Munster, which is pretty cool, both in knockout games. And yeah, Ian Costello said, the win in La Rochelle doesn't mean anything unless we beat Bordeaux. That's absolutely the right mindset to have. As fans, I think the fans who were there in Bordeaux in La Rochelle, and there was about 5,000 of them. Like honestly, it was insane. They'll always have that day, and kind of like how, and kind of to contrast, even not like it, if we're going to talk about Gwyn's and Glasgow and all these teams who didn't show up and didn't want to be there, you also have to praise the team for being like, well, they stuck at it. Do you know what I mean? Like that game, that's 2 weeks in a row that Bordeaux did not deserve the margin of victory. It was a couple of points less on both weeks. Having been at the Ulster game and watched the Munster game back twice, or sorry, watched it and watched it again. Do you know? And that's why hot take, not a hot take at all. I still think Leinster and Toulouse are quite some distance ahead of the rest. Because even though we don't talk about Toulouse, and I'm not trying to piss anyone off here, Toulouse's biggest fault in recent years has been in Europe in particular, they'll get too wild and too expansive, and they were kind of a bit like Bordeaux for a few years. And maybe now that they're going to have to play off Entomac, maybe they'll just be more conservative. They were a little bit more conservative today. Scrappy, but that's not necessarily a bad thing either. But yeah, on Munster, disappointed. Do you know what I mean? Like it's still progress on last year, which is insane because Munster were a better team last year. Still progress on last year. Results across the board. So it's just that's.
I think you're right. I think you're right, Ken, to draw that kind of different contrast between Munster and then Glasgow and Harlequins is that you won that game in La Rochelle last weekend. It was a fantastic result. You were there. You got to enjoy the atmosphere. The fanfare of, winning a big game. But I think the difference between the Munster attitude to this weekend was they know they're going to have another tough away game. They're like, Bordeaux, imperious form, very difficult to beat in their home ground. And although you lost graciously. Whereas Glasgow, big win against Leicester last weekend, and then they know they're going to be playing Leinster away, whatever. It's just how it is, and they go up and don't turn up. And I think that's where I think Munster can take a lot of credit out of going to a difficult away game and playing well, whereas Glasgow went to Dublin and didn't show up and kind of threw the towel in after 25, 30 minutes. So yeah, I think you don't want to lose, but I think if you're going to lose, you want to lose like that.
But as a fan, and we're saying this like we're a fan, and I think it's so important as well. And I think this about media in general. If you are there for analysis, you can't go into fanboy mode. If you're there to be fans, you can be fans. But like if we're fans, we have to stand up and say, well, and I said it to yourself, Hugh, I'm pretty sure, or in the group chat. Europe needed 2 big weekends. And to go back to our previous conversation, I'll end it here, I promise. It needed 2 big weekends. Munster La Rochelle was a result that it needed. I think Benetton beating Cast would have been absolutely massive. Like, just for Italian rugby. Toulouse beating Toulon the manner that they did in an old school game was great. But again, it's like, well, could have done with another result or two somewhere else. And that doesn't have to be Munster. That could be Glasgow, could be Quins, it could be whoever. Sale beating Toulouse. they didn't happen. But as we said, like Munster died with their boots on, and I think that's ultimately, when you look at the context of their season, that's kind of all you could ask for. They really shouldn't be putting a hand on Bordeaux. If Bordeaux played for 80 minutes, they probably score 60 points, but they don't. And that's their fatal flaw. Munster's fatal flaw is probably set piece and probably, as I said, a little bit of naivety at times.
Mohammed, what was your take on this one, just as a neutral?
It was interesting. It was a lot of fun to watch. I did think that Bordeaux would win. It was a bit back and forth. I have to say that tackle from Maxine Luku was quite good when he cut across. I believe he tackled Takir Abrams. I couldn't find out exactly why Joey Carberry didn't play. Can anybody give me some insight to that? And then how many Munster fans actually traveled and watched this game in France?
Joey went off with an injury last week against Ulster. Now, I don't know how serious. It could have been just enough that they were not going to chance it. I apparently something about 2,500 Munster fans were at this game. Which is, again, like 7,000 traveling fans in 2 weeks is pretty good. I know.
It's phenomenal.
Hold my hand up here because I booked La Rochelle in January. Going to France booking France in January is great. Booking France on week notice is absolutely horrible because it's a very tough place to get to, especially when the Delmas is the wrong side of the city. But yeah, just to answer your questions.
All right then. So we'll move on to the final game involving a URC team this weekend, which was Connacht versus Racing. Now, hands up. I always feel that we give Connacht a bum rap on this, but we didn't all catch all of it. There was a lot of sport happening all at the same time on Saturday night. Look, Ben, I think you caught as much of this as anybody. Playing with a man up at home against a Racing team that's been bang average in the top 14. Yes, they brought all their big guns. I haven't seen Racing play like that all year. That's probably the best I've seen Racing play all this season. And just even towards the end, even as unlikely as it was, Connacht were playing against 13 men at the end and just managed to just drop the ball.
Yeah. Helter-skelter rugby, I think, that game yesterday. I think Racing played with 14 men for 66, 67 minutes yesterday. I think, Nolan Nagaric, he's, again, behind Luca and Dupont, I'd probably say, the third best nine in the top 14. I think he was fantastic yesterday. I think he's a small lad, but he kicks so astutely. Like, there was one particular kick, I think, around the 55, 60th minute where Racing did start to rack up a few penalty scores and then scored a couple of tries around that time where 50-22 from way, way inside his half. It was an absolutely fantastic kick. Owen Farrell came on and marshalled well, although he did do that typical arm tuck tackle, which on another day might have been a red, but it remained a yellow. I think he was a little bit lucky with that. But, Owen Farrell's technique has been questioned for the entirety of his career. And, it's been, 10, 15 years he's now been playing and never seems to be able to go to tackle school and come out there with a certificate to say he's passed.
This wasn't a tackle, it was a ruck clear out. That's his technicality. Do you go to, if you get red carded for an illegal clean out, do you have to go to tackle school?
What happens? I mean, he should do. I mean, it looked a bit nasty, and I think on another day a ref might give that a red card because it was a total chicken wing. His arm was well in.
He had an old shots as he went off as well. I was like, mate, you did it. I seen you do it.
Yeah. Well, I said that in the group chat last night, I think, and I maybe used a bit, colourful language, but he's one of those people who just doesn't seem to accept officiating decisions irrespective of his behaviour, and it's happened for a number of times now. You just see him mouthing off. And I'm just like, Owen, mate, you would be in the sort of echelons of Wilkinson, Carter if you just behaved a bit better and just had a bit more humility on the pitch instead of answering back. And because of his attitude, people don't like. I generally think people don't like him very much. I think he doesn't have he's not a likable person. He's a fantastic 10, but he's not a likable guy. And I think that's where that's where the struggle is for him. He just hasn't won the haters over, and his tackle technique, his ruck clear outs, just not good enough. But that Racing team, they have turned a corner in the last couple of weeks. I think their top 14, top 14 form has turned up a little bit. Lancaster played quite well yesterday. He kicked quite well. But Legaric, I think, was absolutely fantastic yesterday at 9, and I think he's the reason that Racing came through that game. But Connacht to the end, 2 tries in the last 10 minutes against 13 men, and they'll be kicking themselves. They've not got through, because again, that would have been a home semi-final for them as they were the top seed. So they'll be gutted, like Osprey's been gutted.
I'll come to Kaelin in a second. It was when Hanrahan was taking like the whole shot clock to line up his conversion. I was like, mate, the conversion doesn't matter. Like you need to score another try anyway.
I've had a lot of JJ moments with the T, and me, if there was an inconsequential league game on the line against fucking, I don't know, prime All Blacks, but you get nothing out of it, he'd nail the kick from anywhere. But the poor lad, he gets nervous. You can see it in his face. But just on that, like, Ben, am I right in saying Edinburgh was second seed?
We're third.
Good. Oh,
Third seed.
sorry. I'm distracted. Anyways, back to you. I'm in the room. I'm so sorry, people, tuning in. But yeah, so like for Connacht as number one seed, this feels just like a massive, like, they don't get many.
This is
Like,
the second time they've lost 43 points to 40 in like 4 weeks.
that is also a mad stat, actually. But like this would have been their second home semi-final in Europe since 2010. That was their last one. Do you know, like back when Toulon were like, we have Johnny Wilkinson and no one else. That's how far long ago it was. It just feels like a massive, and I know like there's a couple of injuries there, and obviously, you know, like the injuries are a big factor because obviously Joanna goes off, and then you get all this like with the switching around of the back line is what I'm trying to say. But then at the same time, like, why is Paul Boyle one of the best players in the Connacht team in this game? It needs to be Bundy. It needs to be Mac Hansen. It needs to be Beelum. Like the way I see it is, and someone said this very well on my own podcast about the Women's Six Nations. Certain teams you can go full kiddie gloves with, like Zebra are a good example, or someone like that. Connacht, you just can't. You're number one seed. You have to. And I know Racing are a good team, and Racing carry an aura and a pressure, and that all comes with them. But at the same time, I just look at that Connacht team and like you had that game. You had that game, and it just feels like they've let one massively slip. And I do feel like I've said this before. I know some of the lads on that team, and my heart does go out for them. I want to see them do well. I'm not concerned trolling or anything like that. It's just this was the chance, and it's just so frustrating.
Here's a stat for you, Caelan, and the rest of you. Connacht's 40 points yesterday. 33 of them were scored in the first 10 in the last 10 minutes of the game. They scored 7 points in 60 minutes against 14 men.
That's a good stat. I enjoyed that stat.
Well, you've got to be kicking your penalties, and they didn't actually. They didn't kick a single penalty yesterday. It was a penalty try and 4 converted and 1 unconverted tries. And I just think you've got to be winning penalties. And just keep just scoreboard pressure. It's a cup game. It doesn't matter about the bonus points. There's no such thing. And I think that's the difference between us, Edinburgh beating winning yesterday, kicking off penalties, and they were afforded to us, or just winning penalties, just being clever around the ruck, sort of within 22 10-meter range. And they just didn't do it.
Connacht's game plan is too bitty for a team that are. It's not that like, oh, you can't play a certain way if you're a certain type of team. I'm not saying anything like that, but they are very ruck focused for a team, and they're therefore relying on calls. I'm not saying Mac Hansen was wrong to call out officials on the week he did. He was right in what he said that time, but Connacht are a team that rely on a lot of calls because of how they play as well. They are a team who look to pressure you and put you under pressure and win penalties and go upfield that way. And that can have a knock-on effect then as well in big games. And I think that's what we've seen this year in particular, with 2 narrow losses to Munster, a narrow loss to Leinster, this narrow loss as well, and 1 or 2 others in the URC.
I think Connacht fans will be the most disappointed over this weekend. I think of how it's transpired, and then I think Ospreys will be second after that. But Connacht will be kicking themselves. You could see them just utterly despondent, full time when the Garrett kicks into touch, and yeah, they should have won that yesterday. But
that's
60 minutes without scoring.
Yeah, like it's a frustration. But like again, can you compare it to a Glasgow, a Quins, or whoever? No, you can't. You're just absolutely fucking disappointed. And it's twice in 3 years the Connacht have had this opportunity in the Challenge Cup and kind of fumbled it as well, which is annoying because they are good enough to go on and run the Challenge Cup. Do you know, like I think they're every way as good as Edinburgh or as good as, to be fair, Leon are anomaly. Like they could finish 14th, the top 14, win the Challenge Cup in the same year. Like they're that kind of team. But yeah, really frustrating.
It's just turned into such a forgettable season for Connacht. And what you said there, Caelan, just rings with me so much. Like I'm not going to pretend that I've watched Connacht avidly, but even just going over the stats and things, like who's your go-to man? Is it, like you said, is it the Irish internationals like Bundy, or is it Mac Hansen, or is it Carl Ford, or is it Hurley Langton, or is it Cian Prendergast? I just don't know who's their guy, who's their talisman. It just seems to be someone different every single game, and there's you don't know, like if you're playing against Connacht, you don't know who you got to worry about, but in a bad way.
Yeah. Like they don't know who they're relying on more than anything else. And like this is the thing. Like I'm not going to comment on any particular team. I'll just go around the provinces. For Ulster, you can almost say at the same time as me, Stuart McCluskey. It's always Jim. For Munster, it's nearly always Tyke Byrne. For Leinster, it's nearly always James O'Rourke Gibson Park. For Connacht, you don't know. And to be fair, obviously Bundy is one of those players. Obviously, he's one of those guys that you look to. Like I'm not, I'm not stupid either. But it just feels like they don't have a game plan that suits Bundy as well. Do you know what I mean? Like if they were a more direct team, maybe you'd be looking at Bundy, maybe he'd be pulling off these performances. But they're very bitty, I think, at the moment. I think they have an incomplete game plan, if I was to boil it down to one thing. And I think they'll kick on. Billy Millard is coming in there next year as a general manager, and they will make good signings, I'm sure, but just really frustrating. And I'm sure, like, do you know what? The fact they're in South Africa this week might be good for them. Just get out of the place. Just get as far away as possible. Enjoy your trip. Season is as good as done. They're not going to think that, but their season is as good as done. Honestly, just enjoy it. They're actually down in Cape Town this week. So I do hope they enjoy it and they can have that kind of week, because these weeks are just gut wrenching for a team who thought they could get to a final, and absolutely rightly so. Yeah, tough.
Yeah. Okay, well, you alluded to it there briefly, Karen. So we're just, as we do on this show, we're just going to mention the Women's World Cup, just run down the results and the vibes from it. From a Wales versus...
You're 6 months too far ahead.
What did I say?
You said World Cup.
Oh, sorry. Women's Six Nations. From a Wales point of view against France, look, 42 points to 12. I feel like it's a weekend. Well, certainly on Saturday, the two games on Saturday, the score lines don't tell the story of the games. And I feel like 42 points to 12 for Wales, that's the best I've seen Wales play in 2 years. And I don't think the 42 is accurate. I think the referee lost her cards at one point, to be fair to her. And yeah, so we needed to see from Wales women this weekend just gone. We needed to see steps forward, because we kind of wrote off the first two games of Sean Lynn basically having 4 training sessions with them. And so we was like, okay, well, he's 4 weeks in now. We're not expecting the world, not expecting you to beat France. We need to see progress. And we saw that, a lot better progress. I thought Kaylee Powell at 10 really worked well. I thought Courtney Keat at 12 was fantastic. I thought Georgia Evans at number 8 had an absolute warrior performance. Probably the best I've seen her play for Wales. So there was definitely something there, something we can take forward. I'm not too bothered about taking 42 off France, because I don't think it tells the story of the game. Similarly, Kaylin, with Ireland women, kind of the what was it, 49-5 in the end? That's not a reflection of that game either.
No, it was a really good first half. And Ireland defended really well. And even if you look through the stats, you're like, wow, 20 tackles, 17 tackles, 15 tackles. But ultimately, England figured out after about 30, 35 minutes, we just need to run over them. They're not going to wilt. We're not going to get... Usually England, they'll just run over the top of you for about 20 minutes. They'll tire you out, and then they'll spread the ball around. They'll score 50, 60 points. That's what they do. They realised they weren't going to be able to do that against Ireland, who defensively have really shown up this tournament, to be honest. And they just said, we're just going to run over the top of you. And I think then, by the time it hits 65, 70 minutes, then Ellie Kildun is able to run in an easy try, because Ireland are just out on their feet. To use the analogy I used earlier, because it was actually used about the Ireland women, you can't be too nicey nice. Yes, it's a better result against England than in years gone by, but it's also a defeat, and it's a big defeat at home. But now it's about next week. This time last year, when they got absolutely thumped by England in Twickenham, they bounced back. They got a huge result the week after by beating Scotland in the
5.
No, in Ravenhill, Kingspan Ravenhill.
Okay.
This week now they've got 8 days. They've got Wales in Newport. Wales are going to. They're still pretty confident. Like their confidence isn't as low as it used to be. And then they got Scotland, who just had a really poor result today. Like not convincingly beaten by Italy, but close to it. So a big 2 weeks for Ireland. If they can hold on to third place, I think they can be happy insofar as bar 40 minutes. And this is a big if, right? If they can get 2 wins, you can look back at this tournament and say we had a bad 40 minutes, and that's it. And that's a great place to be. But need to win. Because it's one thing to win games when you're the underdog. It's another thing to get into this momentum of we're the third best team. We're going to beat Italy, Scotland, Wales every year. That's going to be like that's something they have to deal with. They dealt with it well against Italy. Now we need to see it 2 weeks in a row, and hopefully we do. And again, I'm always like obviously I'm going to root for my national team. Like that's not something I'd ever go against. But like again, knowing some of the players there, I know they're going to be absolutely buzzing. Like this time last year when no one gave them a chance, they were buzzing for the World Cup and they hadn't even qualified. They had such belief in themselves. So I've full confidence in Scott Beamond, in Emily Costigan, who's got a lovely, lovely if anyone wants to check it out. In Scott, and Dan McMahon in the whole team. But just big 8 days now, really big 8 days, and hopefully beat Wales next week and be in pole position for another third place finish.
Mm. And as you alluded to, a very disappointing result for Scotland. Scotland, by rights, should be going for that third place. Look, it's very typical Scotland of the forwards are a bit.
Three home games against the three teams you'd be looking at. Well, not necessarily
conceding 5 tries at home to Italy. Italy aren't great. Like, fair play to them, and Italy is still a URC team, so you have to give them the props. That's a fantastic result for them. But from a Scotland point of view, like it's a bit like Scotland. someone posted on Blue Sky, they said, I don't like comparing men's teams to women's teams, but with Scotland it's difficult not to. Like the pack for Scotland's women isn't their best feature, but their backs are absolutely sensational. And they should be. I think the consensus now among Scotland fans is they're less than the sum of their parts, and they should be competing for a third place in the Six Nations, and to not achieve it is really disappointing.
No, it's big for them. And obviously I haven't seen as much of Scotland because they haven't played Ireland yet, and that's usually my guaranteed game that I'd watch. But big 2 weeks for them. I would have said that they would have been a tough matchup for Ireland in the last week, but now it feels like that game is going to be we really need to win this. That's not a great place to be in because that would be essentially like 4 years in a row final game against Ireland, absolutely scrambling. So here's hoping that they improve, but don't be Ireland.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, then. So let's talk about round 15 of the URC coming up. So starting with on the Friday night at 7:35 UK time is Edinburgh versus the Sharks. So I guess, Mohammed, first question to you is what kind of team are the Sharks going to send?
The best we can. Everything we can muster. Yeah, everybody's pretty chill. They had a week off. There was training this week. Some of the guys on Instagram in Cape Town on some rest days and stuff. So yeah, exactly when Sharks going to fly out, that can be sometimes ambiguous. Exactly what team they put out, much like the Leinster not naming the team that they sent to South Africa more recently. That could also be somewhat ambiguous. So we might only see a match day 23 closer to the actual game. But the game's on Friday, so yeah, I'm hoping everyone's relatively fit. I'm hoping we actually go for it. The idea is to do the best we can on this two match away tour of Europe. Hopefully a like 6 out of 10. That would be great. More than that, even better. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and I wish Ben the worst of luck. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so weird seeing the league positions for the Sharks because fourth, you don't feel like the fourth best team in the league. I'm just going to come out and say it, but that's just how it's worked out. Ben, are you confident of another home win?
I think it could be a little bit after the Lord Mayor's show on Friday. I think it'll be interesting to see what side we put out. I think we've got Zebre the week after, then it's the back-to-back Irish games at the end, Connacht and Ulster. We need to win at least 3 or 4 to guarantee top 8. I think it's very, very congested around there from 5th down to 14th, I think, off the top of my head. 10 points separating those teams, if I'm having a rough guess. Obviously, I need to see the table to be absolutely certain on that, but I'd expect to see some changes for Friday because I think yesterday would have taken a lot out of the lads. So, and again, what do the management team look at now? Are they going to focus on that semi-final against Bath in 3 weeks' time? And maybe, a slightly weaker team, and then maybe send over a second string to Italy the week after to play Zebre. So, yeah, I think it'll be tight. Zia want us to win, but whether we will win and whether we put out a team that's going to be able to win that game, I'm not sure. But look at the weather forecast, it's going to be a little bit cold, a little bit wet, and potentially a little bit windy. So I'm not sure the Sharks will be as well able to cope with that, especially if they are all just sunning themselves in Cape Town right now. So yeah, it might be a rude awakening. Try not to Edinburgh Tuesday, Wednesday, whenever they go this week, or if they're already there. But yeah,
Yeah. Moving on down then to Lions versus Benetton. So, Mohammed, it's been a weird season for the Lions. Started so well and then completely, like, it feels like they've come off the rails, lately 14th in the league. They need to get some feel good back.
Yeah, definitely. They're gonna try their best. They're gonna try and make the most of the season they have so far. I don't think they're statistically completely out of getting top eight. Maybe sort of unlikely. I mean, there's only 4 games left. Um, yeah, and I'm just not so sure about some of the like their starting fly off is not that convincing. They've got 2 really good scrum offs. That's good for them. Their forward pack is inconsistent. They obviously lost last week. Um, that was away, I believe. So they're back in Johannesburg. They've also had more time to sort of prepare exactly what team Benetton's going to send across. They've also had a week off. Will be also interesting. So it depends on the quality, but the Lions will try their best, and we're just going to have to see their match day 23 to really give a clear indication if I think they can actually pull off a result. I do rate Benetton really, really well, especially in terms of their rotation of players, and they've got actually reasonably good depth.
I
And
think that's
what's
good.
also
I've said it a million times. I think Benetton squad is better than Italy's squad.
Mm.
That's my opinion. But Ben, coming to yourself then on the team that Benetton might send, obviously, I'm not claiming that you've got insider knowledge, but seventh in the league, they've managed to work their way up there despite flattering to deceive at times this season.
mm,
But they've got nothing else to go for now, and this is kind of the
mm,
end of the road for this team in terms of the management is moving on. A lot of the
mm.
players are going to be moving on at the end of this season. It's been quite funny seeing Toulon fans have been messaging Menicello on Instagram saying, "Don't sign for La Rochelle, come and sign for us." And apparently his move to La Rochelle has hit the breakers. But
Interesting.
do you
I
think do you
wonder why.
think do you think that Benetton should be just going all guns blazing down to South Africa?
I mean, it's difficult because they're going from the high veld to the coast. They got the Stormers away the following weekend, so I don't know what type of team they're going to send down there. Benetton, they don't always travel that well. I think it's probably the wrong time of the season for them to be going to the Southern Hemisphere to play. I think they could slip away with this back to back over the next 2 weeks and pick up not even a losing bonus point. I think the Lions will be looking to regain some pride after a difficult sort of last 4 to 6 weeks without picking up many victories and obviously going out to us the previous week in the Challenge Cup round of 16. So I'm going to back the Lions on that for next weekend.
I go with that. And then Mohammed, back to you again for the Stormers. Look, I didn't realize that Stormers had finished their season with 4 home games. That is going to take them from 10th in the table. They've got to be targeting decently well within the playoffs with that scheduling.
it's going to be interesting. They've got a lot of their key backs back available. Yes, they're going to be missing their more recent captain who got the red card. So he was quite, his name escapes me at the moment, but he was
Belgium.
quite useful. Definitely for sure, yeah. He was quite useful. He's fantastic off the bench as well. I think the Stormers are gonna they're 10th now. I think they're gonna sneak into the top eight. Especially with that stadium's going to be mostly packed in these last 4 games. So then they're not in European competitions. It means they'll have a break between the 2 games and then the next 2 games. So I think they're going to throw the ball around. But then again, they also have coming in. It's a relatively good Connor team who are probably smarting from having just lost. So again, the Stormers are going to put out their best team and they're going to go for it. Who Connacht's actually going to send through, and are they going to balance the team out? Are they going to try
Well,
and sort of
yeah.
play a lesser team in the first game and then a better team in the second game? We'll have to see.
Well, this is my question for Kaylin. Kaylin, is this next 2 weeks when Connacht's season goes from forgettable to pretend it's not happening?
It could be. I stand by what I said. Like, their season is as good as over, and I'd like to see them show that kind of, because like the South African tour has been a new lease of life for a lot of teams before. Not necessarily that, oh, we got down and got 2 wins and it's great and we enjoyed the. It's not necessarily that. It's just the fact that you're going away. You have that tour environment for, 2 weeks, because they'll probably jet off today or tomorrow, or sorry, tomorrow or Tuesday. It'll be tomorrow. Sorry, I forgot. It'll be tomorrow. They'll probably jet off tomorrow, and it's good. It's a good bonding experience for teams. It's good to get them kind of down there. Ultimately, like they still have like Zebra to come. I think they should win that. I can't remember their last game of the season. It could be Zebra last actually, but it's a free hit, And like I'd like to see them make some changes. I mentioned Matthew Devine before. I think Devine and Hanrahan are their best halfbacks. I'd like to see Carl Ford come back in. Probably move Mac back to the wing. Hot take: Hansen to the wing and Joanna to 15. Try it. What's the worst that can happen? Do you know what I mean? Maybe a change or two as well in the tight five. So maybe Tierney Martin gets a start, maybe Ainger gets a start. So yeah, we'll see. But hopefully they can just keep it steady. The area's gone out of their season anyways. So if they could get like a late season boost, that would be great.
Into the first of the Welsh Derby. So it's Judgment Day in Cardiff this weekend. So although this is officially an Ospreys home game, it's played in Cardiff. So it's not basically. So I'll be planning to go to Judgment Day. For people who don't know, it's a double header between double derbies basically in the Principality Stadium. It was in Cardiff City Stadium last season, which did not go down very well at all. And then, so it's Ospreys versus Cardiff first up, and then Dragons versus Scarlets a bit later. Ospreys, Cardiff first. Look, from Cardiff point of view, this is like kind of you had got to win it kind of thing to keep your playoff hopes alive. Currently in ninth. Their record against Ospreys is very hit and miss. They've had some great wins against them on Judgment Days in the past, but they've also had some very frustrating defeats to the Ospreys as well. And the thing with the Ospreys is it after the Lord Mayor Show, they've played probably their best available team for the last 2 games, and the track record for the Ospreys is that they don't play their best team several weeks in a row. They rotate a lot, and they put out I don't want to say a second string, but they put out a heavily rotated team. They don't tend to go full strength week after week after week. Whereas Cardiff have had the break, like I said. So I think for Cardiff, they're going to be looking at this like, no, we've got to win this. I should mention what's gone on with Cardiff, just to a quick explainer. So Cardiff, where do we begin? So Cardiff went into administration and have been bought by the WRU. So Cardiff, up until the end of season before last, were bankrolled by a man called Peter Thomas. He very sadly passed away. And when he passed away, the income stream that he was providing went with him. And so there was some very dicey moments in terms of what was going to happen for Cardiff. I'll stop sharing. So for this bit, there were some moments where people weren't sure what was going to happen, but they found a new buyer in a company called Helford Capital who came in, and everyone was very positive about that. Everyone thought that was going to herald a start of the good times. There was suggestions that they had links to Middle Eastern money. People started talking about marquee signings, and that hasn't happened. And if anyone is watching on the YouTube, you can find a podcast that's already got a lot of views, which is the Cardiff Central podcast, talking about everything that's happened. And they kind of talk about how there were clues. If you go back and look at it retrospectively, you can say, okay, that was a clue as to maybe something like this was coming, because it felt like a big shock. It felt like it came out of nowhere. Cardiff's attendances are by a long way the best in Wales, and they've been going up. They've been bucking the trend in Wales of their attendances have been climbing rather than declining. So, yeah, so it was a big deal. The WRU have stepped in. Now, the thing that kind of made the decision for the WRU is basically Abitini came out and said that the fine from the URC to lose a team would have been more expensive than buying Cardiff. Cardiff don't have any assets. They don't own their own stadium. I don't believe they own their own training ground. So I think buying Cardiff Rugby cost the WRU less than £500,000. Whereas the fine for Cardiff going out of existence, I don't know how much it would have been, but more than that. So they bought Cardiff for basically the cost of a 3-bed bungalow in the English Midlands. And yeah, so from a rugby point of view, it's business as normal. It does kind of create questions about what's going to be happening going forward, but don't really have the scope to talk about them here. So Moving on to Munster then, hosting the Bulls, and I guess the word of the week, Kaylin, is going to be hangover.
Huh. That's the word of the week every week. Sorry. No. No, look, maybe, but I would back Munster at home. I think there'll be a good buzz around this game. I think, as is often the case with Munster, it takes a big European game and the sun being out and all that to kind of just re-energize things. It's natural. Do you know what I mean? Like it's we could get into the geographics of, you know, Munster rugby in great detail some night. But like for example, this is a half five game or quarter past five game in Thomond Park. So finished at half seven. If for example, and people talk about seat watch, it would take 2 hours to get home to West Cork. You'd be in Dublin quicker. So when you talk about like the Munster rugby thing and how like, oh, how did they get so many people to France and not as full house? This is kind of why. But I think this one will sell well. It looks to be selling well when I checked earlier, looking for tickets for my folks to go. And it should be a cracking game. I think if Munster win this, I think they're properly then. Like, there's a good chance if Munster win this, Edinburgh could well turn over the Sharks. And then we're heading into next week's show and we're thinking, right, we got a race for top four. We've got a 5-into-4 situation properly at stake here. I know it's kind of already half there, but you know. So yeah, big game for Munster. I'll just go on to the intro now because it's at the bottom of the screen. Leinster, Ulster, and Aviva. Big game for Ulster.
All right, taking liberties. I haven't got to that one yet.
Well, just because
Got
then
two other games
then
between now
I
and
can just
then.
shut up instead of coming back in like 2 minutes. That's kind of my
Well,
point.
I'm happy with that.
Sure, that's fine.
Ben always knows how to keep me grounded. I respect that. I respect policeman Ben. No,
I think he wants to get everything out the way so he can keep looking at the golf. Yeah.
I
See?
think
No,
that
this
might
is
be the case as well.
This is
This is
exactly
this
the
is
case.
every week. This is every week, Mohammed. Don't worry, it's not.
It's usually not golf. It was NFL at the start of the season, and my face would go red
Yeah.
from red zone. But no, big game for Ulster. I don't see them getting a result. The injuries has just strangled them at this stage. They've got lads dropping like flies again. But Leinster in the weeks between Europe quarterfinals and Europe semi-finals,
They're going to rotate on it.
So yeah, we'll see. I think Leinster will win, but if you're on upset watch, I think this is the game you're gonna have a look at. Ulster have a good record against Leinster, but I'll go with Leinster and Munster and the Stormers to be count.
All right then. So circling back to Mohammed, what are you expecting from the Bulls at Thomond Park?
Well, obviously, I hope they win because that will help the Sharks keep fourth place away from Munster. However, I still have my doubts. They've been on tour for a while now. Yes, they've got excellent forwards, loose forwards, locks, front row forwards. How tired they are, we'll have to see. I mean, they look like when they won in France last week that they were really keeping calm or whatever, but they still came up short in Scotland. So yeah, Munster clear favorites. I just hope the Bulls do us a favor. I still have serious issues with the Bulls going into a season with such sort of shaky ground in terms of fly half. If they got with the Chamberlain from the Sharks, why didn't they just back him? I know he's poor from place kicks, but he spreads the ball around. They could have used him in a similar sort of Manny Libbok sense of just finding it someone else who could do the place kicks for them. But now they're rotating Johannes and sort of an aging Johan Goosen who can manage the last 20 minutes. But yeah, I'm at least looking forward to the game, and I don't think it'll be that one-sided. I suspect it'll be quite close.
Fair enough. Looking forward to that one. Dragons Scarlets, again, I'll be in that one. It's a must-win for the Scarlets. If we're season is perilously close to completely over with 11th. We're outside shout for playoffs still if we manage to get a win here. Dragons, look, one win all season, bottom of the league. That tells you what the prediction is always going to be for their games. Again, officially it's a home game, and okay, Cardiff is closer to Newport than it is to Llanelli, but it's not a home game. But what I will say is that the Dragons have a weirdly good record over the Scarlets at Judgment Day in the stadium. They even when the Scarlets have been challenging for the title and the Dragons have been not that, the Dragons have been able to give the Scarlets a game at Judgment Day. So I would say don't rule out a Dragons win. Don't rule them out turning up for this one. But it should be a win for the Scarlets, really, all things being equal. And then last game that we had to talk about, Zebra versus Glasgow. Look, Ben, I mean, what kind of team are Glasgow going to send? This could be a zebra win here. They're not favourites, but I should say that people shouldn't be surprised if Zebra win this one.
It'll be interesting to see if Glasgow throw Tupolotto back in next weekend, because it sounds like he's chomping at the bit to get some match fitness ahead of a potential Lions tour. So, I mean, again, it depends on who they send over. I think they need a response to Friday night, which was frankly nothing short of abysmal. But I mean, they'll send over a squad. They still need to kind of secure that home quarterfinal, home semi-final. They'll probably be after, because Scotland's a very difficult place for most teams to play any time of year. So yeah, I think they'll win, but they need to respond on Friday, because Friday wasn't good enough.
I can see that. But Zebra, good team now, so who knows? Right.
Yeah, and I think exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, no, don't interrupting my wrap up.
Sorry.
That brings us to the end of the show. So it just leads me to I need to put a group name for you. Thank you to the gents. Until I come up with a proper name. The whole ABC thing is completely gone. I'm heartbroken. But cheers to all, and thank you to debutants on debut, Mohammed. Thanks for joining us, mate. Really appreciate it. Great insight on the South African side. And it just leaves me to say, enjoy the rugby, and I hope everybody's team wins. Cheers.
That was the United Rugby Rewind. Please rate, review and share us on socials if you can, and join us next week for more of the same. And until then, enjoy your rugby.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
If you're shopping while working, eating, or even listening to this podcast, then you know and love the thrill of a deal. But are you getting the deal and cash back? Rakuten shoppers do. They get the brands they love, savings, and cash back. And you can get it too. Start getting cash back at your favorite stores like Levi's, Plow & Hearth, Adidas, Sephora, and Neiman Marcus. Stack sales on top of cash back and feel what it's like to know you're maximizing the savings. And it's easy to use. And you get your cash back sent to you through PayPal or check. The idea is simple. Stores pay Rakuten for sending them shoppers, and Rakuten shares the money with you as cash back. Download the free Rakuten app or go to Rakuten.com to start saving today. It's the most rewarding way to shop. That's Rakuten. Rakuten.com.